Chapter 5, Part 4 of the Legends of the Jews, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Scott Sherris, Atlanta, Georgia, USA. The Legends of the Jews, Volume 1, by Rabbi Louis Ginzberg. The Iconoclast. But Terah could not be convinced, and in reply to Abraham's question who the God was that had created heaven and earth and the children of men, he took him to the hall wherein stood 12 great idols and a large number of little idols, and pointing to them he said, Here are they who have made all thou seest on earth, they who have created also me and thee and all men on the earth. And he bowed down before his gods, and left the hall with his son. Abraham went thence to his mother, and he spoke to her, saying, Behold, my father has shown those unto me who made heaven and earth and all the sons of men. Now therefore hasten and fetch a kid from the flock, and make of it savory meat, that I may bring it to my father's gods. Perhaps I may thereby be acceptable to them. His mother did according to his request. But when Abraham brought the offering to the gods, he saw that they had no voice, no hearing, no motion, and not one of them stretched forth his hand to eat. Abraham mocked them, and said, Surely the savory meat that I prepared doth not please you, or perhaps it is too little for you. Therefore I will prepare fresh savory meat tomorrow, better and more plentiful than this, that I may see what cometh therefrom. But the gods remained mute and without motion before the second offering of excellent savory meat as before the first offering. And the Spirit of God came over Abraham, and he cried out, and said, Woe unto my father and his wicked generation, whose hearts are all inclined to vanity, who serve these idols of wood and stone, which cannot eat, nor smell, nor hear, nor speak, which have mouths without speech, eyes without sight, ears without hearing, hands without feeling, and legs without motion. Abraham then took a hatchet in his hand, and broke all his father's gods, and when he had done breaking them, he placed the hatchet in the hand of the biggest god among them all, and he went out. Terah, having heard the crash of the hatchet on the stone, ran to the room of the idols, and he reached it at the moment when Abraham was leaving it, and when he saw what had happened, he hastened after Abraham, and he said to him, What is this mischief thou hast done to my gods? Abraham answered, I set savory meat before them, and when I came nigh unto them, that they may eat, they all stretched out their hands to take of the meat, before the big one had put forth his hand to eat. This one, enraged against them on account of their behavior, took the hatchet and broke them all, and behold, the hatchet is yet in his hand, as thou mayest see. Then Terah turned in wrath upon Abraham, and said, Thou speakest lies unto me. Is there spirit, soul, or power in these gods, to do all thou hast told me? Are they not wood and stone, and have I not myself made them? It is thou that didst place the hatchet in the hand of the big god, and thou sayest he smote them all. Abraham answered his father, and said, How then canst thou serve these idols, in whom there is no power to do anything? Can these idols in which thou trustest deliver thee? Can they hear thy prayers when thou callest upon them? After having spoken these and similar words, admonishing his father to mend his ways and refrain from worshipping idols, he leapt up before Terah, took the hatchet from the big idol, broke it therewith, and ran away. Terah hastened to Nimrod, bowed down before him, and besought him to hear his story about his son who had been born to him 50 years back, and how he had done to his gods, and how he had spoken. Now therefore, my lord and king, he said, send for him, that he may come before thee, and do thou judge him according to the law, that we may be delivered from his evil. When Abraham was brought before the king, he told him the same story as he had told Terah, about the big god who broke the smaller ones. But the king replied, Idols do neither speak, nor eat, nor move. Then Abraham reproached him for worshipping gods that can do nothing, and admonished him to serve the God of the universe. His last words were, If thy wicked heart will not hearken to my words, to cause thee to forsake thy evil ways and serve the eternal God, then wilt thou die in shame in the latter days, thou, thy people, and all that are connected with thee, who hear thy words and walk in thy evil ways. The king ordered Abraham to be put into prison, and at the end of 10 days he caused all the princes and great men of the realm to appear before him, and to them he put the case of Abraham. Their verdict was that he should be burnt, and accordingly the king had a fire prepared for 3 days and 3 nights in his furnace at Kasdim, and Abraham was to be carried thither from prison to be burned. All the inhabitants of the land, about 900,000 men, and the women and the children besides, came to see what would be done with Abraham. And when he was brought forth, the astrologers recognized him, and they said to the king, "Surely this is the man whom we knew as a child, at whose birth the great star swallowed the 4 stars. Behold, his father did transgress thy command, and he made a mockery of thee, for he did bring thee another child, and him didst thou kill." Terah was greatly terrified, for he was afraid of the king's wrath, and he admitted that he had deceived the king, and when the king said, "Tell me who advised thee to do this, hide not, and thou shalt not die," he falsely accused Haran, who had been 32 years old at the time of Abraham's birth, of having advised him to deceive the king. At the command of the king, Abraham and Haran, stripped of all their clothes except their hosen, and their hands and feet bound with linen cords, were cast into the furnace. Haran, because his heart was not perfect with the Lord, perished in the fire, and also the men who cast them into the furnace were burned by the flames which leapt out over them, and Abraham alone was saved by the Lord, and he was not burnt, though the cords with which he was bound were consumed. For 3 days and 3 nights Abraham walked in the midst of the fire, and all the servants of the king came and told him, "Behold, we have seen Abraham walking about in the midst of the fire." At first the king would not believe them, but when some of his faithful princes corroborated the words of his servants, he rose up and went to see for himself. He then commanded his servants to take Abraham from the fire, but they could not, because the flames leapt toward them from the furnace, and when they tried again, at the king's command, to approach the furnace, the flames shot out and burnt their faces, so that 8 of their number died. The king then called unto Abraham and said, "O servant of the God who is in heaven, go forth from the midst of the fire, and come hither, and stand before me." And Abraham came and stood before the king, and the king spoke to Abraham and said, "How cometh it that thou wast not burnt in the fire?" And Abraham made answer, "The God of heaven and earth, in whom I trust, and whom hath all things in his power, he did deliver me from the fire into which thou didst cast me." The Legends of the Jews, Volume 1, by Rabbi Louis Ginzberg. Abraham in Canaan. With 10 temptations Abraham was tempted, and he withstood them all, showing how great was the love of Abraham. The first test to which he was subjected was the departure from his native land. The hardships were many and severe which he encountered, and he was loath to leave his home. Besides, he spoke to God and said, "Will not the people talk about me and say, 'He is endeavoring to bring the nations under the wings of the Shekinah, yet he leaves his old father in Haran, and he goes away?'" But God answered him and said, "Dismiss all care concerning thy father and thy kinsmen from thy thoughts. Though they speak words of kindness to thee, yet are they all of one mind to ruin thee?" Then Abraham forsook his father in Haran, and journeyed to Canaan, accompanied by the blessing of God, who said unto him, "I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great." These 3 blessings were to counteract the evil consequences which, he feared, would follow emigration, for traveling from place to place interferes with the growth of the family, it lessens one's substance, and it diminishes the consideration one enjoys. The greatest of all blessings, however, was the word of God, "And be thou a blessing." The meaning of this was that whoever came in contact with Abraham was blessed. Even the mariners on the sea were indebted to him for prosperous voyages. Besides, God held out the promise to him that in time to come his name would be mentioned in the benedictions. God would be praised as the shield of Abraham, a distinction according to no other mortal except David. But the words, "And be thou a blessing," will be fulfilled only in the future world, when the seed of Abraham shall be known among the nations, and his offspring among the people, as the seed which the Lord hath blessed. When Abraham first was bidden to leave his home, he was not told to what land he was to journey. All the greater would be his reward for executing the command of God. And Abraham showed his trust in God, for he said, I am ready to go whithersoever thou sendest me. The Lord then bade him go to a land wherein he would reveal himself, and when he went to Canaan later, God appeared to him, and he knew that it was the promised land. On entering Canaan, Abraham did not yet know that it was the land appointed as his inheritance. Nevertheless, he rejoiced when he reached it. In Mesopotamia and in Aram-naharaim, the inhabitants of which he had seen eating, drinking, and acting wantonly, he had always wished, Oh, that my portion may not be in this land. But when he came to Canaan, he observed that the people devoted themselves industriously to the cultivation of the land, and he said, Oh, that my portion may be in this land. God then spoke to him and said, Unto thy seed will I give this land. Happy in these joyous tidings, Abraham erected an altar to the Lord to give thanks unto him for the promise, and then he journeyed on southward in the direction of the spot whereon the temple was once to stand. In Hebron he again erected an altar, thus taking possession of the land in a measure. And likewise he raised an altar in Ai, because he foresaw that a misfortune would befall his offspring there, at the conquest of the land under Joshua. The altar, he hoped, would obviate the evil result that might follow. Each altar raised by him was a center for his activities as a missionary. As soon as he came to a place in which he desired to sojourn, he would stretch a tent first for Sarah, and next for himself, and then he would proceed at once to make proselytes, and bring them under the wings of the Shekinah. Thus he accomplished his purpose of inducing all men to proclaim the name of God. For the present, Abraham was but a stranger in his promised land. After the partition of the earth among the sons of Noah, when all had gone to their allotted portions, it happened that Canaan, son of Ham, saw that the land extending from Lebanon to the river of Egypt was fair to look upon, and he refused to go to his own allotment, westward by the sea. He settled in the land upon Lebanon, eastward and westward from the border of the Jordan and the border of the sea. And Ham, his father, and his brothers Cush and Mizraim spoke to him and said, Thou livest in a land that is not thine, for it was not assigned unto us when the lots were drawn. Do not thus. But if thou persistest, yea, thou and thy children will fall accursed in the land in a rebellion. Thy settling here was rebellion, and through rebellion thy children will be felled down, and thy seed will be destroyed unto all eternity. Sojourn not in the land of Shem, for unto Shem and unto the children of Shem was it apportioned by lot. Accursed art thou, and accursed wilt thou be before all the children of Noah on account of the curse, for we took an oath before the holy judge, and before our father Noah. But Canaan hearkened not unto the words of his father and his brothers. He dwelt in the land of the Lebanon from Hamath even unto the entrance of Egypt, he and his sons. Though the Canaanites had taken unlawful possession of the land, yet Abraham respected their rights. He provided his camels with muzzles to prevent them from pasturing upon the property of others. End of chapter 5, part 4.